Hello, everybody. My name is Jimmy Smith, and welcome to the Wine with Jimmy channel. This is the channel which is available, most of the content available on the YouTube, but we also have our online portal. This is via winewithjimmy.com. Please click on the e-learning portal, and you can get access to a huge wealth of documents, examinations, multiple choice questions, revision sessions, flashcards, and more video content for members if you sign up to that service. So that's on the e-learning platform available for WSET Level 1, 2, and 3. So we're looking at Austria today on this one. We'll have, as ever on these presentations, we'll have an included working written question at the end so we can get an idea of what WSET is likely to ask you if Austria comes up in the written section, and how you need to structure your answers to get the best marks. All of the social media is at the bottom of every slide during the presentation. So at Wine with Jimmy is me. Please get in touch on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook if you have any comments or questions or concerns. You can also put in a comment below on the comment section of this video on YouTube as well. At West London and at South London are my two wine schools. In London, United Kingdom, and Streatham Winehouse is my bar. So there is a bit of the vacau, which is a newly joined DAC. We'll talk a little bit about that coming up in a second, but the wonderful steep slopes on the Danube River there, which we're going to talk quite extensively about. Austria is pages 113 to 115 in your textbook. It's just over 2 pages, but with lots of pictures. So there isn't a great deal to know about this area. Austria has about half of the area of viticultural land compared to Germany, but only produces about 1/3 of the total production of Germany, so they have much lower yields. This has been a big shift in quality with Austria in recent times, mainly because in 1985, 1986, there was a big scandal, the dilithium glycol scandal, which rocked the Austrian industry. 7 producers were found guilty of adding dilithium glycol, and component of antifreeze, into their musts to really bump up the sugar levels. And this, of course, rocked the industry, and people would not put their trust within Austrian wine. So they have massively changed their industry with very strict and stringent measures to produce wonderfully complex wines today. It really is a country in a renaissance. So yes, let's have a look at the locations first of all. So here is our eastern Austria, eastern and northeastern Austria, bordering places like the Czech Republic, Slovakia, and Hungary, and Slovenia. Okay, so this is the lower part of Austria, which therefore is capable of supporting vines to produce good quality wine. Most of the rest of Austria is mountainous, is alpine, and of course is very common for things like skiing, for example. So that is not where we're looking at exactly. First up is that there are 4 federal states for PDO wines. That's wines with a protected designation of origin. And that is Niederösterreich, which is this kind of yellowy area up here in the northeast. Then we have Burgenland, which is this kind of reddish area on the eastern side, bordering Hungary. We have Vienna, which is this bluish bit which the Danube runs through, and then we finish with Steiermark, or Styria, which is in that bottom area. Sorry, that just froze for a second there, which is this kind of light bluish area which borders Slovenia. So they're the four sort of federal states that will support the wines. Now the biggest area is Niederösterreich. Most vineyards in Austria, and most of them are actually along the Danube in the southern area. That's the big production number of the Niederösterreich, Lower Austria, that means. So that supports a DAC, which is called the Weinviertel, As you see, this is bolded, so you will need to recognize this one. So the Weinviertel is the largest growing area. It is only, if you want to call it on the label a Weinviertel DAC, it is only Grüner Veltliner. So let's start to scribble these things down so you can remember them. Okay, so only Grüner Veltliner. And we're going to talk about the grape varieties in a little bit. Okay, great. So only Grüner Veltliner for this one. Now, they do tend to be, Weinviertel wines tend to be on the lighter side. These are often quite light, lightly fragrant, almost sort of remnant styles of Sauvignon Blancs. But there are some complex ones, of course. There is a term which you may find on the label as well, which is called classic. This will often be the lightest and freshest style of Grüner Veltliner, so classic. So that's quite a typical one. You'll often find no oak, quite fruity styles, and then there are reserve styles here as well. And reserves will have more minimum alcohol levels. So the minimum alcohol level is higher. And you will often find, in fact, these being a little bit oaky as well, potentially with some oak. Okay, we'll put that down there as well. Okay, so that is the Weinviertel area, and most of the key vineyards are along the Danube. We'll take a bit of a look at a Google Earth video very shortly about that. Then there is the vacau area. So this is right in the westerly point of the Niederösterreich, Lower Austria. Vacau is the most famous. There are many great areas like Kremstal, Kremtal, Traisantal. There is lots of very good DACs nestled in this southwesterly point of the Niederösterreich, but it is Vacau which is the most famous. Now you'll notice here that it doesn't say DAC afterwards. Vacau initially did not choose to be a DAC, but it has joined the ranks recently. It's just not in your textbooks. Okay, so your textbooks date from 2016, so therefore they are still on the old laws. But please, it does not matter. You will not be marked down if you forget to put DAC, because in your textbook that's how it is stated today. So Vacau. So what's great about Vacau? Why is it potentially the most famous place? Well, very high quality Riesling and Grüner Veltliner on steep, often terraced, south-facing slopes, of course, on the Danube River. This maximizes exposure. This creates potentially much more riper and concentrated Grüner Veltliners. You'll often see winemaking techniques here, such as lees contact, to even give more body behind the wines. And you'll find these really complex expressions of both Grüner Veltliner and Riesling here, dry examples of both of those. So many of you may have tasted a Grüner Veltliner. You know, you've picked one up for about £10 in the United Kingdom, sort of $15 in the States, and they're generally light and fresh, and that's more like the Weinviertel style. But if you have sort of searched out some sort of more premium Grüner Veltliner, it's likely to come from Vacau, and it's likely to have a bit more complexity, roundness, concentration, ripeness, and overall more body behind it. So they potentially can be quite complex styles. Then we have Burgenland. Now, this is not bolded because it is not the most important area for you to know, but we'll mention this anyway. Very famous Burgenland for sweet and red wines. The southern Burgenland is quite famous for the varieties like Zweigelt. I'm going to write this in now, actually. So let's pop this in down here. So, famous for sweet wines. But also famous for red wines as well. So you can remember this quite nicely. Okay, so famous for sweets and famous for red wines. Yeah, and Southern Burgenland famous for Zweigelt, Blaufrankisch, Sanlerte. We're going to look at these grape varieties in a bit, but also a bit of Pinot Noir, a bit of Merlot, Cabernet Sauvignon. The middle area which is the kind of darker shaded red, is the Mittelbergenland, the Middle Bergenland, and that is a DAC which is famous for Blaufrankisch. There is then what's called the Neusiedlersee Lake. So that is this area just here. I've put it in brackets here, but it's actually, I'll draw an arrow for you. Let's do this. We'll do this in an orangey color as well. Let's just go there. There we are. That is the Neusiedlersee Lake. So this is a very shallow lake, and the vineyards are on the low-lying ground near the lake, not right next to it, but just offset from the lake. And they benefit from these autumnal mists, which mean that you get, due to a continentality of the climate here, great warmth, but also those mists forming. And this means the promotion of Botrytis cinerea, noble rot. And it's actually exceedingly consistent. So noble rot here is nearly every year, which means very consistent. So the prices aren't the most extravagant here. The most common grape variety really for the sweet wines, and I actually am going to scribble this one down here, but these sweet wines, let's do an arrow first because I've got sweet wines just here. Let's go down here. And these sweet wines will be mainly from the Welsh, the most famous anyway, the Welsh Riesling variety, which has nothing to do with Riesling. There is, very sort of complex sweet wines. The Neusiedlersee DAC is famous for the red Zweigelt in this area. Okay, so that is the lay of this area. The only thing I forgot to mention, I'm sorry, I've mentioned a little bit, but the Danube here is Europe's second longest river after the Volta, and this starts its life off in the Alps in southern Germany and empties into the Black Sea. So it really cuts a very important mark and voyage through most of sort of central and then eastern Europe. And it touches vacau, which you need to know, some of the most important vineyards in the Weinviertel DAC. It goes through Vienna, and it actually goes as the north border of the Bergenland as well. So the Danube River, mightily important in this landscape. And let's take a bit of a look at a Google Earth video here. Hopefully this works. I did this earlier. Yes, it is. So let's take a bit of a look so you can get a really good feel on the Google Earth 3D cameras, so you can get a good feel for how this landscape looks. And we'll go through just what we were talking about. There is Austria. You'll see that Vienna has been located here. And Vienna is such a lovely place, really, really lovely. Hold on. Okay, so we're going to looking at, we're going closer here around the beautiful palace and the gardens within Vienna. Some lovely places like the Hofburg, the Schönbrunn Palace, St. Stephen's Cathedral. But here we're picking up the Danube in Vienna. So we are now heading actually against the flow of the river. We're heading towards its source, which will be towards Germany, and that's of course going towards our wine regions. So this is still Vienna, but the land above Vienna, north of Vienna, which you'll see in the distance off here, and in fact which we'll go to, is what we call the Weinviertel DAC. So all of this landscape really. So we've just kind of gone through that landscape. Here are some more vineyards which are actually located on the Weinviertel area, but we are quickly moving towards the Vacau DAC, and you see how wide the Danube River is in this location. Oh, and it's jumped around a bit there. I'm not sure why it's done that. But a very wide river means great reflection and great warmth absorption. And that is a major reason why you get more complexities out of these areas located in the Vacau, this area, the DAC Vacau, producing these complex, robust wines. We're now going to jump over to the other side of Austria. We're kind of looking south at this point. This is the Neusiedlersee Lake. This is that lake which is right nestled in the eastern part of Austria on the Hungarian border. This lake is a large lake, as you can see here, providing that warmth. So that really You can even see it right from the back here. So it's right in that area. So it provides that wonderful amount of warmth, which the red grape varieties like Zweigelt and Blaufrankisch like. So that's why they're quite prominent in this area. But then, of course, there are the autumnal mists, which onset the wonderful amount of noble rot for varieties like Welsh Riesling in this area. So a few things about the laws of Austria, which you may need to understand. So we have the PDO laws that we have in place here. So we have Qualitätswein, like we do have in Germany, and we have Prädikatswein as well with the grading system. So it very much follows a similar suit to Germany. But there are two layers of additions that are found within the Austrian wine laws. We have Ausbruch, which is the first one, which is located here, and I'll scribble and underline this for you. So Ausbruch, which is this one here, and Strohwein. Ausbruch is another category which sits between Bergen Auslese and Trockenbirchen Auslese. Strohwein means straw wine. So it is grapes that have been dried on straw mats traditionally, producing, of course, very powerful, like Van de Paille wines from France, these straw wine styles, or what we find from sort of Appassimento in Italy, for instance. So another couple of categories. Please do recognize those ones. Then there is the Destructus Austriae Controllatus. For me, sounds like something out of Monty Python's sketch. And the DACs, of which there are a number of these, they are, well, there are 9 according to your textbook, but there are additional ones like vacau today. And there are a lot of regulations which are said to be a reflection of their terroir, a reflection of their location. And once the winery follows the laws of the area of the DAC, they may be able to label with it. So you'll see here, you have the Hofbauer, Schmidt-Hofbauer, Weinviertel DAC, and also got classic on this as well, which means it's going to be a very light, fresh style with no oak from the Weinviertel. Remember, that's a specific terminology that you can find in the Weinviertel area. Here on the Burgenland one, you have Ausbruch, which is one of those additions of Prädikatswein that you may find on the label from the very good Viele Oettinger, which make phenomenally good wines across the board, from reds to sweets and dry whites. So the key grape varieties in play in Austria, just over a third of the production is lended to Grüner Veltliner. This green grape, as the name would suggest, is the most widely planted. It produces a variety of styles. It kind of got lauded by the press as a replacement for Sauvignon Blanc, so Austrian's Sauvignon Blanc, and that's because it shares some similar characteristics that you may find in Sauvignon Blanc. So the high-yielding expressions of Grüner Veltliner, commonly found in the Weinviertel DAC, produces very fresh, light, stainless steel fermented and matured expressions, which are often high in acidity, light in body, with good aromatic flavor behind them. So you may find lime, citrus, green fruit, gooseberry sometimes is in there, floral notes, sometimes herbaceous and white pepper characteristics. Then the low-yielding Grüner Veltliner from the sites like the Vacau on those steep south-facing slopes next to the Danube will produce much fuller, concentrated, textured wines with high acidity again, and with oak and lees. So you'll often find more stone fruit edges in these wines, with good aromatic profile as well. Often things like chamomile, honeysuckle, very, very complex wines. They can be remarkably wonderful top-end Grüner Veltliner. Welsh Riesling or Riesling Italico. This variety, Welsh Riesling, is a very sort of Eastern European speciality, and here produces kind of 2 distinctive groupings of styles. Welsh Riesling will be made into dry wines, and often they're very simple and very light and quite fresh with light floral characteristics to them. And then the sweet wines, it tends to be the best because of all the botrytis characteristics and the tertiary notes, as when those age, add more layers of complexity complexity to the more neutral Welsh Riesling. So these are often very, very lovely, floral through tertiary, marmalade, and lovely sort of dried fruit characteristics from the top Welsh Rieslings of the area. And there is some Riesling as well. Riesling is actually a minor grape variety in volume produced, but quite a major grape variety in prestige. And that's really because of the Germanic influence. But Austria and Germany have been making Riesling since way back when. So the best Rieslings will come, of course, from Vacau. That's no surprise, but also areas close to it, DACs near to the Danube, called Kamtau, Kremstau. And they tend to be dry, and they tend to be with quite a bit of body behind them, as we mentioned earlier. Just a little recap on Riesling, because, of course, it is a great variety of extreme importance. Now, Riesling, we have other sessions. Certainly, if you look at the German videos that we have on the channel, we'll go into much more detail about Riesling certainly on the first German session as we talk about the Mosel. So you may wish to want to look at that to get a better feel for the Riesling grape variety. But here, dry to sweet expressions are produced, normally dry and often very high in acidity with a huge flavor profile. It's an aromatic grape, so lemons, limes, and apples, peach, often honey, floral, and petrol, pistachio, pine nuts, kerosene, wax with age, with Rieslings if they do have a good amount of age behind them. Riesling is a very cold, hardy grape variety, tolerant of very cold winters. So it's perfect, of course, in central continental Europe. It's late budding, which means it's spared from spring frosts. It's mid to late ripening, depending on the grape grower and winemaker, really. And it's best on it's very site specific, but it tends to be best on south-facing slopes in the continental zones. Nearly always has high acidities, despite the fact if it's early to late picked, if it's botrytis, passelerage, etc. I'm not going to go into how it's treated in the winery, because that is how we look at it when we focus on sections like the Mosel and Riesling on the German session, but also the Alsace session. We go through that as well. And that is a members only video on the e-learning portal with winewithjimmy.com. Please get in touch if you require access to that for a subscription. Okay, that is the recap on Riesling. The black grape varieties. Now, the black grape varieties of Austria do tend to be focused south of Vienna, around the Neulersee Lake and around the area of Burgenland, and a little bit into Styria as well. Your first grape variety is Zweigelt, and Zweigelt is probably the one that's the most fragrant, aromatically red-fruited and lightly floral, with things like violet and rose. They're quite wonderful fresh wines. It is the most planted, suits the very hot summers that you can have here, and it actually is a crossing between another local variety, Blaufrankisch, which we'll talk about very soon, and Sanlerte, another local grape variety. So Zwei, two, the crossing of these two varieties. Blue, Blaufrankisch, otherwise known as Kekfrankosch in Hungary. The most highly regarded of the red grape varieties, as it has real good body behind it and takes to oak very well. So you'll often find this has darker black and blue fruit characteristics, more body, more alcohol, and then that oak integration behind it. Very famous from around sort of the middle Burgenland zone. Then there is the Sanlerte, which is a variety similar in style to Pinot Noir, has this cherried, plummy note to it and develops leather, meaty, mushroomy notes with age. And it will be aged in oak, really, to sort of exacerbate its characters, to give more intensity behind it. So remarkably similar to Pinot Noir. It's kind of their answer to it. So that is Sanlerte. So let's go through a little bit of questions so you have an idea of what may be asked of you. Here is that label we saw earlier, Weinviertel DAC Classique. What will be the grape variety? Already listed there. Grüner Veltliner is the only grape variety permitted for the Weinviertel DAC. As this wine is a classic, describe what this wine will taste like. Now, be careful with this because we have things like Classico in Italy, which means the historical heartland of the district. It does not mean that in this country. Classic with Weinviertel DAC will mean a light, fresh and simple wine, often with high acidity, with light citrus, maybe stone fruits, bit of white pepper, and it's likely to be unoaked. These are some of the freshest and sort of cleanest expressions of Grüner Veltliner that you can find. Then we have a different label from the quite famous and quite well-known domain Vacau, and this is the Grüner Veltliner Smarrad Kellerberg from Vacau. You are not required to know what Smarrad mean. It actually is some of the finest Grüner Veltliners, a kind of a classification upon only to Vacau. Actually is a local lizard. But if you see the local lizard symbol and Smarrad on the label, you're in for a treat. So as it says, this wine is full-bodied and concentrated. What conditions in the vineyard account for this? We talked through this and we saw a Google Earth video on it as well. The vines are grown on steep, often terraced, south-facing slopes. That's already getting you 2 marks just by saying that. Gaining maximum exposure for ripening grapes, 3 marks there. The vines are also next to the river Danube. That's 1 mark. Benefit from direct reflection and heat absorption by the river. 2 more marks there. That's a total of 6. So quite classic. Now, if you have been studying a lot and watching the videos of the German ones, of things like the Loire, of things like Alsace, then well done for studying lots, but you'll notice there's repetition in what we learn. In these cooler, often continental zones, we're looking for steep, south-facing slopes, often next to rivers. So that's the key sort of combination to get maximum exposure and ripeness from our grapes. If this wine was to age, what typical tertiary aromas and flavors would it develop according to your textbook and WSET? So the real things they want you to know here is that the very high-end Grüner Veltliner will be more honeyed and toasty with age. A lot of you may be able to list many other things that have tried these wines, but that's what they want to sort of get into your head. Honey and toast. You probably could say things like nutty characteristics. You could say sort of dried fruit notes as well, but it's the honey and toast which is what they're after the most here. Honey toast the most. So I hope you have enjoyed your session here on Austria. I hope you have learnt stuff, and I hope you have learnt plenty to get you practiced and ready and confident for your impending judgment day of the Level 3 examination. Remember, it is the written theory that you really need to focus on. That makes or breaks a student. We have plenty more videos which are available and accessible on the YouTube channel Wine with Jimmy. We also have additional members-only videos which are available on the e-learning portal on the winewithjimmy.com website. Please go along to that and have a look at it and see if you'd like to subscribe. We also have written questions and answers, multiple choice questions, revision sessions and flashcards. It's a real comprehensive way to get you really ready and prepared for your Level 3 examination. Otherwise, if you have any comments or questions, please pop them in the comments section below this video, or get in touch with social media if you are that way inclined on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook at Wine with Jimmy. At West London Wine and at South London Wine are my 2 wine schools here in London, the United Kingdom. And at Streatham Winehouse is my brilliant, funky, awesome, cool wine bar in Streatham in South London. If next time you're in London, please come and see us for a class, a glass, or a bottle. I've been Jimmy Smith. Thank you so much.